Here's Mike Garafolo, our friend from the NFL Network. And Mike, I don't think anyone expected Ken Dorsey to last the season, but this is pretty abrupt, even though it was an embarrassing loss on Monday night and the Bills with an NFL worst 13 turnovers. But was it a case of, and Sean McDermott kind of alluded to it, somebody just had to go at this point?
Well, it's been a couple of people now. I mean, Sean McDermott, dating back to when Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator, those two would be at odds, sometimes in meetings with players there. I was told the players would have an offensive meeting with Brian Daboll as the offensive coordinator, and in would come Sean McDermott telling him, you got to run the football more, and Daboll saying, no, we don't want to necessarily do that. And so Sean McDermott, a defensive coach, has had his hand on that side of the ball for quite some time. And look, you can go back to that game against the Broncos the other night, and there were times where I felt they weren't running the ball. I said, they're running the ball so effectively. Why aren't they running it here? And then they finally had that touchdown drive where they ran it exclusively. So McDermott's probably saying, why do I have to be the one to kind of do this? Now, that being said, if there's not 12 men on the field for the field goal and the Bills win the game, if the defense doesn't even let the Broncos get in the field goal range and the Bills win the game, Ken Dorsey's probably still the offensive coordinator of the Bills. You don't fire a guy as an offensive coordinator after you win the game. But because of that, McDermott felt like this was the time to make the move. It's obvious that there's been frustration building up. My understanding is he feels like the offense has been a bit predictable in addition to maybe not running the football enough as well. So they turn it over to Joe Brady, who was thought to be one of these young offensive geniuses, and then he goes to Carolina having not been an offensive coordinator before and struggles for a season and a half. He's replaced there. He went to Buffalo as some kind of redemption project, figuring he could work with Josh Allen as the quarterback's coach. And then when Ken Dorsey gets a head coaching job, well, then Joe Brady can jump up to the offensive coordinator spot. No head coaching job for Ken Dorsey. In fact, quite the opposite. He's let go. So let's see if Brady can cash in on that thought from when he was back at LSU that he was some kind of wonderkind offensive mind here.
Boy, the Bills could definitely use a wonderkind offensive mind. How about the Rams, Mike? You know, Matthew Stafford has the thumb injury. They bring in Carson Wentz. It made me wonder, well, why didn't Robert Saleh bring in Carson Wentz with Zach Wilson struggling all season? But, hey, great. Bring in Carson Wentz. He's going to get a chance to come in. He's a veteran. He can do the job. Nope, turns out Matthew Stafford's thumb injury is kind of healed.
Yeah, he's recovering at a UCL injury with that ligament in his thumb. But Sean McVay saying that they expect Matthew Stafford to be the quarterback after Brett Rippon struggled and Brett Rippon winds up getting cut. And you're right, Wentz comes in as a backup. And with Matthew Stafford's health the last couple of years, wouldn't be surprised if we see Carson Wentz at some point before the season is out. But for right now, it looks like it's going to be Matthew Stafford, which is great. News for the Los Angeles Rams. Remember, they ran the Seahawks pretty much off the field in Week 1 back in Seattle, which feels like forever ago. So now they get them in Los Angeles in the rematch here. And Matthew Stafford expected to be the quarterback for this one. Let's see if he can keep that hand healthy and doesn't have any recurring issues. But right now, looks like Stafford going to be the guy again for the Rams.
Over in the AFC, Mike, kind of a good news, bad news situation for a couple of contenders. You have the Dolphins potentially getting De'Von Achane back. Super talented running back. But then for the Bengals, coming off a very disappointing loss, the Tee Higgins situation is lingering. Tell us about that.
Let's start with Achane because Raheem Mostert's done a fantastic job since Achane has gone down. Now expect that you're going to see both of those guys. My understanding is looks like Achane could be ready to go. They just activated him or opened his 21-day practice window, so they don't have to activate him this week. But looks like he's doing well and actually could have maybe played sometime during the last 4 weeks, but they wanted to play it safe with a young guy and make sure that he wasn't at risk to further re-injure himself. So he'll be back. The Dolphins are also getting a healthier Jalen Waddle, who's been dealing with a couple of injury issues. They healed up over the bye. I think this is a really tough spot for the Raiders after winning 2 games at home with the interim coach, and the emotions were high. It's tough to sustain that. And now you're going on the road against a team that's gotten healthier, that has healed up, that has had the chance to self-scout themselves and dial up some new stuff, which Mike McDaniel's a pretty good offensive mind anyway. I don't see any way that the Dolphins don't roll in this game. You talked about Tee Higgins. That's the Thursday game. The expectation when he hurt himself in practice last week and he missed this past weekend's game was that he was not going to return for the short week, so it looks like that'll wind up being the case. But there are some other key injuries in this Thursday game between the Bengals and the Ravens. Trey Hendrickson, who did work his way at least back to practice. He's got some work to do if he's going to play in this game. That would be a huge loss for the Bengals up front. They would need Miles Murphy, their rookie first-round pick, to really step up if Hendrickson can't go. And on the other side, you've got Marlon Humphrey. It's a calf injury, not an Achilles. Some people thought it was going to be an Achilles, so that's a good sign. But on a short week, tough to see him coming back on an Achilles a calf. And then there's Ronnie Stanley, who's dealing with a knee injury. Perhaps we won't see him. So some key players banged up and maybe not going to play here in a really big AFC North matchup here. If the Bengals win this game, this division is going to be tighter than a drum, Jay. These teams are all packed together right now.
It's going to be a great game. We're going to see it on TSN Thursday. Another game you're going to see on TSN this week, the Grey Cup is on Sunday, and every year we like to get Mike Garafolo's Grey Cup pick. So, Mike, it's Peter Schrager's Winnipeg Blue Bombers against Joe Burrow's Montreal Alouettes. Who do you like on Sunday in Hamilton?
A couple of guys that are struggling, and by that I mean Schrager and Burrow. Schrager just didn't quite get over that. He had that last question that Mira Sorvino got in Celebrity Jeopardy, so Schrager didn't quite get there in the final Jeopardy, though he answered it correctly. And then you got Burrow, and the Bengals just haven't been right this whole season, but I think I'm going to have to go with my colleague, Peter Schrager, and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I think they take it on Sunday. Schrags and I will be partying in the streets of Manhattan, probably alone. I mean, I don't know how many other Blue Bombers fans are going to be running through Manhattan, but we're going to do it anyway.
Chris Streveler is probably still shirtless somewhere in Manhattan, just wandering around as the Bombers try to. Well, yeah, track him down if you can for us, Mike. Always great to chat with you, my friend, and we'll talk to you next week.
You got it. Thanks, Jay.